Captain Elias Carter stood in the middle of the Zorvath training arena, sweat forming on his brow. Around him, a crowd of towering alien warriors watched in anticipation. Their reptilian features, sharp horns, and armored bodies made them look intimidating, but Elias kept his expression neutral. He had faced worse things in his time as a diplomat. He hadn't planned on being in this situation. The meeting between the Terran diplomatic corps and the Zorvath High Council was supposed to be peaceful. But then someone had suggested a friendly sparring match to test human combat skills, and somehow Elias had ended up as humanity's representative. Across from him stood Commander Vortak, the strongest warrior among the Zorvath. The alien was at least 7 feet tall, his dark red scales gleaming under the artificial lights of the arena. He grinned, revealing sharp teeth. "Do not worry, human. I will not break you too badly." Elias chuckled, stretching his arms. "That's reassuring." The Zorvath warriors pounded their fists against their chests in approval. This was a test of strength, not a real battle, and Elias knew they respected courage. Still, he had no illusions. Vortak was a seasoned fighter, and Elias was only a trained diplomat with basic combat skills. A deep drum echoed through the arena, signaling the start of the match. Vortak lunged first, his speed shocking for someone so large. Elias barely dodged, rolling to the side as the alien's heavy fist smashed into the ground, leaving a small crater. All right, he's strong, very strong. Elias had no chance of winning in a direct fight. The Zorvath were built for battle. But humans had something else: adaptability. He danced around Vortak, dodging quick punches and sweeping kicks. The crowd cheered, impressed by his agility. Vortak growled in amusement. "You move well, but you cannot run forever." Elias smirked. "I don't need to." Vortak charged again, raising his arms for a powerful downward strike. At that moment, Elias saw an opening. He ducked, sidestepped, and tripped the massive warrior with a well-placed kick behind the knee. Vortak lost his balance. His heavy body twisted awkwardly, momentum carrying him forward. He crashed face-first into the ground with a loud tejudi. The arena fell silent. Elias stood frozen, breathing hard. Had he won? A moment later, Vortak groaned and rolled onto his back, blinking in confusion. The Zorvath warriors around them gasped, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Then, a voice from the crowd shouted, "The human has claimed his right." Elias blinked. "Wait, what?" More voices joined in. "He has defeated the warrior. The law is clear." Elias didn't like the sound of that. He turned to Vortak, who was now sitting up, rubbing his head. "Up. What law are they talking about?" Vortak sighed, shaking his head. "You just bested me in combat, human." And, before Vortak could answer, a new voice cut through the noise, sharp, commanding, and angry. "Then by Zorvath law, he must take responsibility for you." Elias turned toward the speaker and felt his stomach drop. A tall, fierce-looking Zorvath woman stood at the edge of the arena. Her silver armor gleamed, and her deep green eyes burned with irritation. She was clearly a warrior, but there was something regal about her posture. Whispers spread through the crowd. Lady Xilara. Elias had heard the name before. She was a high-ranking diplomat, a brilliant strategist, and, more importantly, Vortak's wife. Realization hit Elias like a freight train. His mouth went dry. "Wait, are you saying?" Vortak gave him a sympathetic look. "Yes, human. By our laws, if you defeat a warrior in single combat, you must take responsibility for their household." Elias stared in horror. "You mean?" Silara's eyes narrowed. "Yes, by Zorvath tradition, you must marry me." Elias wished he had just let Vortak win. Elias Carter sat stiffly in a grand hall, surrounded by towering Zorvath warriors. The air was thick with murmurs as alien officials debated his fate in their deep, growling language. He could feel their eyes on him. some amused, some disapproving, and others simply curious. Across the room, Lady Xylera stood tall, her green eyes locked onto him like a predator sizing up its prey. She was not happy. Her sharp claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest of her chair, and Elias had the uncomfortable feeling that she was imagining his neck under them. Finally, one of the elders, a Zorvath with silver scales and long battle scars across his face, turned to Elias. "Human, do you understand the responsibility you have claimed?" Elias cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding." He forced a diplomatic smile. "I didn't mean to defeat Commander Vortak. It was an accident." The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Vortak himself, seated nearby with an amused expression, chuckled. "An accident? You knocked me flat on my back, little human. That was no accident." Elias groaned inwardly. "Okay, maybe it wasn't an accident that I wasn't trying to." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Look, in human culture, winning a fight doesn't mean marriage." The elder's eyes narrowed. "Then your species has strange customs." Elias sighed. "I'm sure we do. But in my culture, marriage is a mutual choice. Both people have to agree to it." Xylera scoffed. "You believe I agreed to this?" Her voice was sharp as a blade. "I am the wife of a great warrior. And you?" She looked him up and down, unimpressed. "Are a small, fragile diplomat." Ouch. Elias resisted the urge to rub his temples. "Then we're on the same page. You don't want this, and I don't want this. So maybe we can, cancel it." Another gasp swept through the room. The elder shook his head. "The bond of combat cannot be undone so easily. To reject the union, one must face the trial of honor, a challenge that proves their worthiness or failure." Elias frowned. "What kind of trial?" Xylera leaned forward, a small smirk forming on her lips. "A battle. To the death." Elias choked on air. "Wait, what? Death?" Vortak patted Elias on the back, laughing. "Don't worry, human. You already beat me once. Maybe you'll get lucky again." Elias shot him an exasperated look. "Yeah, luck is not a battle strategy." Xylera stood, her long cape flowing behind her. "If the human refuses the trial, the law is clear. The marriage stands." She crossed her arms. "So, diplomat, what will you do?" Elias hesitated. There had to be another way out. He was a negotiator, not a warrior. He could argue his way through trade deals, political disputes, and even tense first contact situations. But fighting to the death over accidental marriage, that was a whole new level of insanity. His mind raced. If he refused the trial, he'd be stuck in a political marriage with an alien woman who clearly despised him. If he accepted, he'd likely die. Fantastic choices, really. He glanced at Vortak, who still seemed to find the whole situation hilarious. "And you're okay with all this?" Elias asked. "I beat you, and now I have to marry your wife." Vortak shrugged. "She is strong. You will need that if you hope to survive Zorvath politics." "That's not comforting," Elias muttered. Xylera sighed impatiently. "Well, human, are you going to fight, or accept your fate?" Elias took a deep breath. His instincts screamed to run, but something inside him, the same stubborn streak that got him through every impossible mission, refused to back down. "I'm a diplomat," he said carefully. "My job is to find solutions that don't involve fighting." Xylera raised an eyebrow. "And what solution do you propose?" Elias thought quickly. "A compromise. A trial that doesn't involve death, but still proves whether I'm worthy or not." He looked at the elder. "Surely there's another test in your traditions." The elder stroked his chin. "There is one alternative." He turned to Xylera. "He may complete the rite of endurance, a test of willpower and survival." Xylera's smirk returned. "Ah, that could be entertaining." Elias frowned. "Define entertaining." Xylera stepped forward, her green eyes gleaming with something between amusement and challenge. You will survive 3 days in the Red Wastes, the deadliest region of our world. No weapons, no supplies, just you and the land. Elias felt his stomach drop. Of course, because that sounds completely reasonable. Vortak grinned. Better than a death duel, yes. Elias wasn't so sure. The elder nodded. It is decided. The human will undergo the rite of endurance. If he succeeds, he may challenge the law. Silura folded her arms. And if he fails? Vortak slapped Elias on the back again. Then we bury him with honor. Elias groaned. Great, just great. He had 3 days to survive an alien wasteland, alone. Somehow, getting married sounded easier. Elias Carter stood at the edge of the Red Wastes, staring at the endless stretch of cracked red earth and jagged rock formations. The sky overhead was a dull orange, with 2 suns burning in the distance, their heat already pressing down on him like a heavy weight. A hot, dry wind howled across the landscape, carrying the scent of dust and something metallic. Behind him, a group of Zorvath warriors, including Silara and Vortak, watched from a raised stone platform. Silara had an amused smirk on her face, her arms crossed. You have 3 days, human, she called out. No food, no water, no weapons. If you survive, we will hear your case. Elias exhaled sharply. And if I don't? Vortak grinned. Then we sing songs of your bravery and burn your remains with honor. Great, Elias muttered. A loud horn blasted from the platform, signaling the start of the trial. The warriors turned and left, disappearing back into the towering city gates. Only Xilera remained for a moment longer, watching him with unreadable eyes. Then, without a word, she turned and followed the others. Elias was alone. The wastes showed no mercy. The moment the last warrior vanished, the full force of the Red Wastes hit him. The heat was brutal. It felt like standing inside an oven, and within minutes, his throat was dry. His Terran uniform, designed for comfort, was already sticking to his back. He needed water. That was priority number 1. Elias started walking, scanning the horizon for any sign of shelter or resources. The ground was rough beneath his boots, the cracked earth sharp like broken glass. Every step kicked up red dust that clung to his clothes. After what felt like hours, Elias spotted something in the distance. Tall, twisted rock formations jutting out from the desert like massive claws. If there's any shade, it'll be there. Pushing forward, he reached the rocks and slumped against one of them, finally escaping the burning suns. He took a deep breath, trying to think. Survival basics. Find water. Avoid danger. Stay alive. Simple, right? The first challenge. Elias had barely rested when he heard it. A deep, rumbling growl. His body went rigid. Slowly, he turned his head. Emerging from behind a rock was a massive creature. It looked like a reptilian wolf, its body covered in dark red scales that blended perfectly with the wasteland. Its eyes glowed yellow, and its long, sharp teeth dripped with saliva. Elias swallowed. Well, that's not good. The creature sniffed the air, locking onto him. Its muscles tensed. Elias didn't need to be an expert to know what was coming next. It charged. Elias threw himself sideways just as the beast lunged, its claws scraping the rock where he had been. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing. He had to be smart. The creature snarled and lunged again. This time, Elias didn't dodge, he ran. Thinking like a human. His legs burned as he sprinted toward the rock formations, the beast close behind. He had no chance of outrunning it. But maybe he didn't need to. Elias spotted a narrow gap between 2 towering rocks and made a split-second decision. Instead of running straight, he suddenly stopped and pivoted, darting sideways into the gap. The beast roared, trying to turn, but it was too fast, too heavy. Its momentum carried it forward, and with a loud crack, it slammed headfirst into the stone. Elias winced at the impact. The creature staggered, dazed. Not wasting a second, Elias grabbed a loose rock from the ground and smashed it against the beast's skull with all his strength. The creature let out a final growl before collapsing. Breathing hard, Elias stumbled backward. His hands trembled, but he was alive. "Take that, alien wilderness," he muttered, dropping the rock. The first victory. Elias didn't know how long he stood there, catching his breath. But soon, another thought hit him. If this thing survived in the wastes, it must have a water source. Carefully, he examined the beast's mouth. Sure enough, its sharp teeth were stained with moisture, fresh water. Somewhere nearby, this creature had been drinking. Elias grinned. "Well, looks like you just saved my life." Following the beast's tracks, he moved carefully through the wastes until he found it, a small, hidden cave with a pool of clear water inside. Relief flooded through him. He knelt by the pool and splashed water onto his face, savoring the coolness. He had found water. He had survived his first battle. But this was just day one. As he leaned back against the cave wall, staring out into the endless red wastes, he knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. Elias Carter sat in the cave, sipping small amounts of water from his hands. The cool liquid felt like the greatest treasure in the universe. He had been in the red wastes for less than a day, and already he had fought a giant reptilian beast, almost died of thirst, and learned that survival on this planet was going to be anything but easy. 2 more days to go. The cave was small but provided decent shelter. The air was cooler inside, and the rock walls kept him hidden. He knew he couldn't stay here forever, but for now, it was a safe place to rest. Unwelcome visitors. Elias had just begun to relax when he heard something outside. A faint clicking sound, then another. He tensed. Slowly, he crawled to the entrance of the cave and peered out. At first, he saw nothing, just the endless red wasteland. Then, movement. Small, spider-like creatures, each about the size of a dog, scurried across the rocky terrain. Their bodies were covered in hard black shells, and they moved in perfect synchronization, like a well-trained hunting pack. Elias's stomach twisted. Great. More things that want to eat me. One of the creatures stopped. Its thin antennae twitched. Then, all at once, the entire group turned toward the cave. Elias barely had time to react before they charged. Escape or fight? Panic surged through Elias. He grabbed a loose rock and threw it at the closest creature. It hit the shell with a loud clank, but didn't even slow the thing down. Nope. Not good. Thinking fast, Elias turned and ran deeper into the cave. He didn't know where it led. Maybe a dead end. Maybe something worse. But he had no choice. The sound of the creature's sharp legs scraping against the stone sent shivers down his spine. The passageway narrowed, and suddenly, Elias found himself in a wider chamber. The air here was damp, and in the dim light, he saw something that made his heart stop. Bones. Not just small bones, huge ones. Whatever had died here was big, far bigger than the spider creatures chasing him. Elias didn't know if that meant safety or danger, but right now, he had to think fast. The creatures skittered into the chamber behind him, surrounding him. Their legs moved in jerky, unnatural motions, and their sharp mandibles clicked hungrily. Elias clenched his fists. No weapons. No way out. What now? Using the environment. Then he noticed something. The ceiling of the cave was lined with stalactites, sharp, heavy rock formations hanging right over the creatures. A plan formed in his mind. A crazy plan. Elias picked up another rock and threw it at the ceiling. The impact made a few smaller stalactites break loose, but it wasn't enough. The creatures lunged. With no time left, Elias did something reckless. He ran toward the biggest stalactite he could see, leaped onto a rock, and kicked the formation with all his strength. Crack! The massive stone broke loose and crashed to the ground, right onto 3 of the creatures. A horrible screech filled the air. Dust exploded in all directions. When the dust settled, Elias saw that half of the creatures had been crushed. The others hesitated, their antennae twitching wildly. Elias picked up another rock and banged it against the wall, mimicking the sound of falling stones. The creatures screeched again, and to his relief, flood. Panting, Elias collapsed onto the ground. His body ached, his heart pounded, but he was alive. A discovery in the darkness. As the dust settled, Elias noticed something else. A tunnel. The rockfall had revealed a hidden passage, leading even deeper into the cave. Faint blue light glowed from within. Curious, Elias stood up and followed it. As he walked, the air grew colder. The blue glow became stronger, and soon he reached an underground chamber filled with strange crystal formations. The crystals pulsed with light, casting an eerie glow on the cave walls. Elias reached out and touched one, only to feel a surge of warmth. Energy. His mind raced. These crystals, they weren't just glowing. They were alive in some way, maybe even valuable. If he could bring some back, it might change everything. For the first time since entering the Red Wastes, Elias grinned. Maybe surviving this trial won't just save me. Maybe it'll give humanity an advantage too. But first, he had to make it out alive. And something told him the hardest part was still ahead. Elias Carter knelt beside the glowing blue crystals, his fingers tracing their smooth, glass-like surface. A soft warmth pulsed from within them, like a heartbeat. These weren't just ordinary minerals. They were energy sources. This could be huge for humanity. If the Zorvav hadn't fully explored the Red Wastes, then maybe they didn't even know these crystals existed. And if he was the first to discover them, it meant that humans could negotiate for something valuable, something more than just survival. But first, he had to figure out a way to take some back with him. An unexpected reaction. Elias pulled a small piece of metal from his belt, a simple tool he always carried. He tapped one of the crystals gently. Nothing happened. He applied a little more pressure. Suddenly, the crystal flared with bright blue light, and a low hum filled the air. Elias stumbled backward as the energy rippled through the chamber, making the ground tremble slightly. "Oh, that's probably not good," he muttered. The glow slowly faded, but now he knew one thing for sure. These crystals were reactive, maybe even unstable. He needed to be careful. Elias pulled a smaller shard from the ground. Unlike the bigger formations, this one didn't glow as brightly, but it still carried that strange warmth. It was light, much lighter than he expected. He tucked it into his pocket. One sample. That's all I need. The earth shakes. Just as Elias turned to leave, a deep rumbling echoed through the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling. He froze. Then the sound grew louder. Something's coming. A low, guttural growl filled the tunnel. The same kind of growl he had heard before, but much bigger. Elias's pulse quickened. He pressed himself against the cave wall, trying to stay out of sight. And then he saw it. A massive creature, twice the size of the reptilian beast he had fought earlier, squeezed through the tunnel entrance. Its red scales gleamed in the dim light, and its glowing yellow eyes locked onto him. Elias's throat went dry. Fantastic. A bigger, meaner version. The creature sniffed the air. Its nostrils flared, and its gaze landed on the crystals. Elias watched as the beast moved toward the formations, its claws clicking against the stone. It wanted the crystals. Wait, does it feed on them? That gave him an idea. A risky plan. Elias slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the small crystal shard. If this thing was attracted to the energy, maybe he could use it as a distraction. Carefully, he tossed the shard away from the exit. It clattered against the rocks. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. It let out a deep snarl and lunged, its powerful jaws crunching the shard in one bite. Elias didn't wait. The moment the creature turned, he ran. His boots pounded against the stone floor as he sprinted toward the tunnel. Behind him, the beast let out a furious roar. It realized its meal was not the main prize. Elias didn't dare look back. He bolted through the passage, dodging jagged rocks and leaping over loose debris. The cave trembled as the beast charged after him. The light at the end. Up ahead, Elias saw a faint glow. The exit. Summoning the last of his strength, he pushed himself forward, lungs burning. The roar of the beast was almost on top of him now. He could feel the vibrations from its steps. Just as he reached the exit, the ground gave way. Elias jumped just in time. The ledge behind him crumbled, sending a cascade of rock, and the beast plunging into the darkness below. Elias tumbled forward, rolling onto the hot desert sand. His body ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he was alive. The red waste stretched out before him, bathed in the light of the two suns. The trial wasn't over yet, but he had survived another night. And more importantly, he had something valuable. The Zorvath thought this was just a test of survival. They had no idea he had just found a secret that could change everything. Elias Carter lay on the scorching red sand, breathing hard. His body ached, his throat burned with thirst, and his heart pounded like a war drum. But he was alive. The monstrous beast was gone, swallowed by the collapsing cave. The hidden energy crystal was safely in his pocket, pulsing with warmth. He had survived another challenge in the deadly red wastes. But the trial was far from over. No time to rest. Elias forced himself to sit up. The two suns were climbing higher, making the heat unbearable. He needed to move. Staying in one place for too long was a death sentence. He glanced around. The landscape was the same as before. Endless cracked earth, towering red rock formations, and no sign of civilization. Except, in the distance, he spotted something moving. A group of figures, walking toward him. His stomach twisted. Zorvath warriors, or something worse. Squinting, he could barely make out their shapes. They were tall, with dark, flowing robes and weapons slung across their backs. They moved in perfect coordination, scanning the land as they walked. They weren't Zorvath. Elias's instincts screamed at him to run. The desert raiders. Elias scrambled to his feet and sprinted toward the nearest rock formation, hoping to find cover. His legs felt like lead, but he pushed forward. The figures must have seen him because a loud horn blasted through the air. Moments later, they started running too. Elias cursed under his breath. Who were they? Bandits? Hunters? Something worse? He didn't plan to find out. Ducking behind a rock, he pressed his back against the stone and tried to control his breathing. His only advantage was speed. He was lighter than them, and he could use the terrain to escape. Peeking around the corner, he saw the raiders moving in fast. Their eyes glowed slightly under their hoods. They weren't just ordinary people. Elias didn't hesitate. He bolted, a desperate escape. The desert wind howled as he ran, kicking up sand behind him. The raiders shouted in a language he didn't understand, but their meaning was clear. They wanted him alive. That was worse than being left to die. Arrows whistled past him, embedding themselves in the ground. One nearly grazed his arm. Elias pushed himself harder, lungs burning, legs screaming in protest. Up ahead, he spotted a narrow canyon between two massive rock formations. If I can reach that, I might lose them. Gritting his teeth, he dove into the canyon just as another arrow struck the ground behind him. The narrow walls gave him some protection, but the raiders were still closing in. A risky move. Elias ran deeper into the canyon until he reached a split. Two paths, one leading left, the other right. He had no idea which was safer. Then he remembered the crystal in his pocket. Pulling it out, he held it up. It pulsed faintly, and when he turned left, The glow grew stronger. That was his answer. He took the left path, sprinting forward without looking back. The hidden doorway. After a few minutes, Elias stumbled into an open chamber within the canyon. The walls were smooth, too smooth to be natural. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, and at the far end, a massive door stood half-buried in the sand. This wasn't just another cave. It was something ancient. The crystal in his hand glowed even brighter, reacting to the door. Elias didn't have time to think. The raiders' voices echoed behind him. They were getting closer. Desperate, he pressed the crystal against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep hum filled the air. The door rumbled, dust falling from its edges as it slowly began to slide open. Elias didn't hesitate. He slipped inside just as the door shut behind him with a loud boom. Darkness swallowed him whole. But he was safe. For now. And as his eyes adjusted, he realized one thing. He had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple survival test. Elias Carter stood in complete darkness, his breath loud in the silence. The massive stone door had shut behind him, sealing him away from the desert raiders outside. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to breathe. He was safe. But where was he? Slowly, his eyes adjusted to the dim glow of the crystal in his hand. The chamber was vast, with smooth metallic walls that looked too advanced to be natural. Strange symbols covered the surfaces, glowing faintly like starlight. Elias realized something huge. This wasn't just an old cave. This was a hidden structure. Maybe even a ship. The awakening. As he stepped forward, the ground beneath him lit up. Soft blue lights activated along the floor, stretching down a long hallway. The air smelled different, clean, but ancient. Elias had seen enough ruins in his travels to know one thing. This place was waiting for something. Or someone. The crystal in his hand pulsed, and suddenly, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Foreign presence detected. Initiating scan. Elias froze. The thin beam of light swept over his body from head to toe. He tensed, half expecting an alarm or an attack. Instead, the voice spoke again. Compatible genetic match, unlocking core systems. The walls hummed, and for the first time, Elias saw what he was standing in. It wasn't just a structure. It was an ancient command center, the lost civilization. Screens flickered to life, displaying alien symbols. Elias had no idea what they meant, but some of the images were clear. A map of the planet, with glowing energy points scattered across the surface. Massive underground chambers, hidden beneath the red wastes. And finally, a starship buried somewhere beneath the sands. Elias's heart pounded. This was not a simple survival test anymore. This was the lost technology of an ancient race. If the Zorveth didn't know about this, then humanity had a chance. The chase isn't over. Before Elias could fully process what he had found, a loud boom echoed through the chamber. He turned just in time to see the door behind him shaking. The raiders were trying to break in. They knew about this place. Elias looked around desperately. There had to be an exit, a way to escape. He scanned the glowing symbols and saw a platform in the center of the room. A control panel blinked beside it. A transport system. No time to hesitate. He sprinted to the panel and slammed his hand onto the glowing button. The platform hummed, and suddenly, the floor beneath him shifted. A smooth energy field surrounded him as the platform descended. Just as the raiders finally broke through the entrance, Elias vanished into the depths below. The buried ship. The platform came to a stop in a massive underground hangar. Elias stepped forward, staring in awe. Before him, buried beneath centuries of sand, was a colossal alien ship. It was sleek, black as night, and pulsing with the same blue energy as the crystal. Elias barely believed what he was seeing. This was far more advanced than anything the Zorveth had. If humanity could access this ship, they wouldn't just survive. They would thrive. One final choice. Elias approached the ship's entrance. The moment he stepped onto the ramp, the crystal in his hand flared, and the ship's doors slid open. The same deep voice from before echoed inside. Pilot recognized, initiating reactivation. Elias hesitated. This was it. If he stepped inside, there was no turning back. He could try to escape, return to the Zorveth, and pretend nothing had happened, or he could take control of this ship and change the balance of power forever. The sounds of the raiders above were getting closer. Elias took a deep breath, and then, with a determined step, he entered the ship. The doors sealed shut behind him. A new beginning. The control panels lit up as Elias approached the main console. The ship's systems came back to life, and a massive star map appeared before him. Not just of this planet, but of the entire galaxy. Elias grinned. He came to the red wastes to survive. But now he had the key to something much bigger. And for the first time, humanity had the advantage.